There was a time when drones were considered to be one of the worst weapon systems in the game. Although I wouldn't say that they were the worst, they definitely had a lot of problems. For example, the drones refused to attack targets at one point, but now they have been vastly improved. Most of the issues have been fixed, and drones became one of the scariest weapons in the game, and I believe they are one of the most powerful weapons to be used with implants. You can easily triple your DPS with the drone bomb implant, and that implant works really well on the Stratius, which can be very sneaky. On the Stratius you can get about 4,500 DPS, which results in destroying a battlecruiser or battleship within seconds. So I expect that implant to be significantly nerfed in the very near future. Now, all that raises the question: what is the, let's say, the universally best drone boat ship in the game? Well, a lot of my friends were comparing the Dominix to with the Rattlesnake, and some would say that the Dominix became much better than the Rattlesnake with the recent changes to the drones. So today I'll be taking a look at the Dominix, and I'll also be taking a look at the Rattlesnake, and we will be comparing the differences between these two ships. And I think it will be very interesting to see how the two ships perform when compared with each other. So let me pick the correct Rattlesnake first. I have a bunch of them here. Two of them have a weird golden nanocore that I'm not going to use today, and one of them has no core, and it is this one. Okay, perfect. So 2.7 thousand DPS. Now this is a PvE build. I'll focus on the PvP and PvE builds today, mostly the ones that I usually recommend and the one that I would use on the ship. Now the Rattlesnake has two large drone slots. However, the Rattlesnake has some insane bonuses for the large drones. Now, at first, a long time ago, I didn't really like the Rattlesnake because of the fact that it didn't receive any bonus on medium and light drones, which made the Rattlesnake highly vulnerable to smaller ships, especially cruisers, frigates, and interceptors. But with the new changes and with the buffs to drones, and the overall ship itself has been improved, that problem has been mostly solved. Now I'll use this Dominix for the comparison, and I will remove the nanocore. I believe this nanocore has the bonus on drone damage. Both of the ships will be compared without a nanocore, just to make it more fair and more accurate. Let me disassemble this. Okay, it is disassembled, and now 3162.87 or 2614.52 drone DPS. Now the Dominix has a bonus on all drones, small, medium and heavy drones, and I really like that that's the case, because against small ships using the smaller drones is definitely a better choice. Now I will compare the stats of the two ships on this little comparison chart here. The Dominix has been added. Now let me add the good old Rattlesnake. And okay, so the Dominix is a armor tank. The Rattlesnake is obviously a shield tank. Now the Rattlesnake has a much better tank than the Dominix, because you get a 20% bonus on shield resistance. Now the Dominix doesn't have any roll bonuses, while the Rattlesnake has a plus 475% larger drone damage and plus 12% larger drone effective hit point bonus, which is a massive increase in the overall drone damage and drone hit points. The drones on the Rattlesnake basically have the hit points of a cruiser or battlecruiser, so yeah, that is kind of wild. And also you get extra missile damage on the Rattlesnake. After all, this is a Gurista pirate ship, and they have nice missiles as well. and nice shields. So, DPS wise, the Rattlesnake should be better on paper, but the Dominix has 5 drones, the Rattlesnake has 2 drones, 4 high slots on the Dominix, 5 high slots on the Rattlesnake, 3 medium on both, 6 low slots on the Dominix, and 7 low slots on the Rattlesnake. Again, the Dominix is a armor tank, the Rattlesnake is a shield tank, also a big difference. And that 1 extra low slot on the Rattlesnake can be used for extra tank, can also be used for extra DPS, depending on what type of ship you want to build. So on paper it does look like the Rattlesnake should have higher DPS and better tank. Now the capacitor is good on both ships, and the speed, I would say the Dominix is a bit faster than the Rattlesnake. Now as for the drones, I have the offense ogres, and they are known to be the drones with the highest DPS, and if you want the highest DPS you should be using the Galante drones, but they're a bit slow, so that's one trait that you have to sacrifice. This is a PvP build for the Dominix, and you can also, you should carry a lot of other drones in the drone bay, because you never know when you have to replace them. With the Dominix you can swap to small and medium drones to attack and defend yourself against smaller ships, like let's say an Ortus, or let's say a Succubus, or an Interceptor, or a Bellicose. All these ships will take a lot of damage from the drones. If your target goal is to go and fight battleships and battlecruisers, torpedo launchers is definitely the way to go. But against the smaller targets, and in most cases the rapid missiles are actually the way to go, but again it really depends on what type of ship you want to build. Rapid missiles have higher rate of fire and better application, but less damage. Meanwhile torpedoes have much better damage, much higher alpha but lower damage application, and are mostly used against big ships. Now I'll show you the DPS on all of these drones. Even with the small light drones, the Dominix has more than enough DPS to blow up all smaller fast ships, and I would say the Dominix is definitely the better ship for less ISK. You have to remember that the price of the Rattlesnake did go up recently. The Rattlesnake used to be very cheap, but now since the drones have been buffed and since the ship itself was buffed, that has been changed, and the Rattlesnake is now a bit more expensive. So if you manage to buy the Rattlesnake for 1 billion, then you probably made a lot of profit now, because now the Rattlesnake goes for about 3.4 to 4 billion, which, you know, is a pretty good price. Now, this build with different drone types is good to counter yellow hardeners, and I basically use it all the time on my Stratus. So let's jump in the Rattlesnake and let's do the same thing on that ship. Now the Rattlesnake is interesting because with the 7 low slots and with the extra bonus on shield tank, you can retain about 100,000 passive shield passive tank while having crazy DPS. Now the Rattlesnake has a bit more DPS, about 200 more DPS, 2,800 DPS in drones, and of course you also get some DPS from the missiles, because the ship does get bonuses on missiles as well. Here you can take a look at the drone stats. 32,000 hit points on the drones, and that is kinda insane actually when you think about it. And you also have the other drones, I think the assault drones, which have more tank, or if not the assault drones, then you have the other ones. Let me just quickly double check that. I think we also have like the speed version, the tank version, and the DPS version of the drones. I mostly use the DPS drones because I don't usually lose the expensive ones, but you know, having all sorts of drones is always a good idea. And this is basically the performance of the medium and light drones. Definitely not looking good. And on the Rattlesnake you can also do a build like this with two different damage types, although The advantage of the Dominix would be that you can basically completely eliminate the effect of a yellow hardener, because you have like all different drone damage types. With Rattlesnake you have only like 2 at best, so you have to rely on the missiles to do some of that damage as well. Now, that was the PvP build on the Rattlesnake that has all sorts of different drone damage amplifiers, and by default the Rattlesnake can fit more drone damage amplifiers while retaining the same tank, which makes that thing a bit better for massive alpha damage. And I think the Rattlesnake should have about 15,000 DPS, while the Dominix has like 12 to 13,000 DPS, so a small difference in DPS as well. Now this is a PvE build, and this build is only for high sec, by the way. Does have fantastic DPS, it does have some nice tank as well. The implant that will be used with this build and with the previous PvP builds that you have seen here is the drone bomb implant.
Undocking.
Now for PvP you can pick the 300% extra damage option that will give you basically the 15,000 DPS, but for PvE you can use the remote reload. It is working really well, and it also works on the carriers as well. Now I made a lot of different builds for both these ships, so if you are interested in a more detailed fitting guide for either the Dominix or the Rattlesnake, then check out the videos that I made for the Dominix, and for the Rattlesnake the specific builds for the two ships in the two separate videos, because if I would to cover all the builds again, it would take a while, and I know that my videos are a little bit too long, and I'm trying to reduce the length a little bit, because yeah, 50 minutes per video is a bit too much, but I always try to cover everything that's everything possible, so that you guys have a lot of builds to work with, and so that I can give you as many ideas as possible. So the implant is active. I usually run the drone units to improve the burst damage. The bombs unleash a lot of DPS and a lot of alpha damage in a short amount of time, which makes them perfect for PvP, and that made them really overpowered for the last couple, I would say, months, because all the implants have been nerfed, but the drone bombs remain the same. But I think that's going to change very soon. Well then, let's take a look at the maximum DPS outputs. 3,800, 3,400 only drones. Now it's 4,490.50 DPS, 4,900 and 4,400 in the drones. And with the last one, 5,100 and 4,700 DPS if we look at drones only. So this is about 13,000 DPS with the drone bombs active, which honestly is fantastic. Awesome DPS, and yes, still a bit too strong, because that is going to shred any battlecruiser, any battleship, any average battleship in basically seconds, especially the ones in low sec. Now with the medium drones, the DPS will be a little bit lower, but with the medium drones your target would probably be a battlecruiser, cruiser, or even a frigate. The drones are quite fast. The Valkyrie drones are one of the fastest mini drones in the game, and they are actually the fastest ones. If you go with the assault Valkyries, they go really quickly, they're very fast. For extra DPS for the mini drones, use the offense drones. For extra speed, use the assault drones. And if you want a balance between both, then the Republic fleet drones or Navy drones are also a good option. I use the assault Valkyries because they seem to be very solid and very good as well. And now with the light drones against fast cruisers and interceptors and frigates, they still have so much DPS that they'll eat through a frigate and cruiser in seconds. I mean, there is no frigate that can tank like 5,000 DPS to the face, and these drones do apply that DPS. They're also very fast. And you can also add some drone speed mods on the ship if you want the drones to go a bit faster, so you have a lot of options to ruin the day of a frigate pilot if they decide to engage your Dominix. Overall, the drone modes are a big threat to the frigates. Now the Rattlesnake. This ship has one extra low slot, so I can fit dual adaptives and one booster, or you can basically go with 5 drone damage upfires,
Undocking.
one red and one adaptive and one shield booster. That way you will get about 15.5 thousand DPS with the bombs, of course, which makes this thing really lethal. Now the Rattlesnake, as I mentioned before, used to have issues with small ships. It used to not be able to apply the damage to the small ships because of the large ones. They used to be very slow, and most ships were able to easily speed tank them. And I believe even now you can actually pull off the speed tank against the Rattlesnake drones, but it's a bit more difficult, especially if they have an implant, or especially if they have some of the drone speed bonus module with the, I think it was called the supervision module, the navigation computer, the drone navigation computer. If they have that, then it might be a bit more difficult to speed tank the drones. But the Rattlesnake only has the large drones, and it did feel very vulnerable to the smaller ships. But now with the extra stats, with the bonuses and with the changes, this thing is actually extremely lethal. And here you can take a look at the DPS, about 15,000 DPS with the current setup, which is awesome. And that's only with the drone DPS. It's a little bit over 16,000 DPS, about 16,000 DPS actually, if we include the missiles, or if you use torpedo launchers, that's about 17,000 DPS. So yeah, you got pretty good DPS output on the Rattlesnake. Definitely a very interesting ship for PvP, which is surprising because again, you can pull off the 800,000 hit point passive tank Rattlesnake with a DPS build easily, and that build is actually one of my favorites.
Destination reached.
Now the issue with PvP on both of these ships is that you only have like 3 medium slot modules. Since most ships nowadays have like 80 billion stabs, you want to have at least 2 or even 3 scrummers and 1 web. Or dual scrummers and 1 neutralizer,
Warp
or a
drive
web.
active.
I mean, it really depends on what type of fit you like to fly on your ship. So with the Rattlesnake having with the Rattlesnake and with the Dominix, the 3 medium slot modules might be a problem, especially if you encounter a ship that has, let's say, 9 stabs. For 9 stabs you need 3 scrummers in order to hold them. 2 will not be enough because 2 scrummers is 8 points. However, you can technically use the tactical missile implant, which will give you plus 2 extra points on the ship. So in that case, 2 scrummers can work because you will have about 10 points in total if you have that implant. So you definitely have a lot of different options. Now for PvE, this is where things get a bit interesting because both will have very similar performance. And when I say similar performance, the clear time will be about the same. Now 2 drones versus 5 drones. You know, I think the number of drones isn't that important. The stats of the drones is important. 1 ogre on the Rattlesnake deals about 3.2 thousand damage per hit. 1 ogre on the Dominix deals 1.3 thousand. So technically, the 1 Rattlesnake drone equals 3 of the ordinary drones on an ordinary drone boat. And the same can be said with the drone hit points. Basically, 1 ogre on the Rattlesnake equals 3 ogres on the Dominix in terms of hit points. So the drone performance in that aspect is about the same. Now one thing where the Rattlesnake will probably do better is with the missiles, because it has a bonus on missiles as well. It deals a bit more damage on missiles, so that's one aspect of the ship that is probably going to work better than on the Dominix. However, on the Dominix you can basically use any other weapon system that you like. If you have lasers, you can use lasers. Although I always felt like it was natural to run the missiles on the Dominix and to run missiles on all drone boats, because they seem to be universally the best weapon system for the drone boats. Although you can also use the turrets, you can also use any other weapon that you like, but I personally prefer to use missiles on my drone boats just because of how the missiles work and just because missiles never miss. Also, one very important aspect to keep in mind. Now, the Dominix can be a shield and armor tank, while the Rattlesnake is exclusively a shield tank. Do not armor tank the Rattlesnake, it's hilariously cursed and it's bad. The Rattlesnake should be a shield tank, and a shield tank only. After all, you get some fantastic stats on the shield. The Rattlesnake is the second tankiest ship in the game. Now the tank on the Dominix is, I would say, okay, but the drone boats have less hit points by default. Mostly because the drone boats need to have extra hangars. They need to be a bit more hollow on the inside in order to have the extra drone bay, and that in return does reduce the overall hull volume, armor, and I find that highly interesting and overall a very nice touch to how the game operates. As for the Rattlesnake, I don't think that they have compromised on that a lot. I mean, the Rattlesnake doesn't have auto drones, so by default it doesn't need to have a big drone bay, because only 2 drones it can build like only 2 drones on the grid. So yeah, that's also a very interesting aspect. Although in EVE Online you can't really fit a lot of drones in the Gurita ships, so you have to be careful with that. But so far, I'm again very happy with how the Rattlesnake performs. One of the more interesting ships to fly now, and the 2 ships that have been changed the most was the Rattlesnake and Nestor. Now the Nestor is just that thing is just absolutely insane. Mostly because the Nestor is the drone boat with the highest possible DPS out of any drone boat in the game. It can reach like 25,000 DPS with the correct build. It can also be a loggy, can be also used as a mining ship, guardian, and a hilariously crazy ship. I don't know why they made the Nestor the way they did, but yeah, the Nestor is quite a funny ship, honestly. Will be fun to see how the Nestor compares to the Rattlesnake, because both are interesting in their unique role. Although the Nestor is more of a multi-purpose ship, but in the end it does really depend on what you want to do with the ship. Meanwhile, the Dominix, I would say the Dominix will definitely win if we compare the ship stats, and if we look at the ship pricing. The Rattlesnake is definitely a bit more expensive and definitely does hurt more to lose. The Dominix can be easily replaced. Even the tier 9 Dominix should have very similar performance. I mean, the difference between the tier 10 and tier 9 Dominix is like what, 5%? I mean, the difference is really silly, which would make the tier 9 Dominix a much better value for money, and definitely we'll see how that level ship works. But for PvE performance, I would say both should be fantastic, and I just cleared this mission with the Rattlesnake. Was extremely smooth and was extremely easy, I would say, without a problem whatsoever. And now let me dock and let me swap to the Dominix and let me do a similar mission to this one. Now again, I don't have a
engaged.
nanocore bow ships. I decided to go and do this little task without nanocores because I know that the nanocores are not
Undocking.
really the same on all ships, and just because of that I'll just go without them to see how this will
Destination
work.
reached.
Now one thing that they broke in the last update, they broke the drone when you swap drones, they broke it again.
Warp drive
It used to be
active.
so much smoother. Now it's messing with me again. It does keep pushing the screen left and right, and that is kind of extremely annoying when I want to change the drones, especially if you have a lot of drones. So yeah, the swapping mechanic still has to be improved, because man, let me tell you, this can be a very stressful process if you want to quickly change your drones. It does take a long time to replace the drones. It's not as bad as it used to be, but it's still it can be better. So yeah, I would actually prefer if they would open a pop-up window where I can just swap the drones in and out. That's actually a better idea than to have that small window where you have to swap the drones. Now, the Dominix has 5 drones, and they do 1.3 thousand each. Now, the fact that you have 5 drones is also kind of a benefit, because there is more targets for the enemy to shoot, and they probably can't focus on all drones. However, the drone management can be troublesome, especially if you use a lot of different drone types. That can be really troublesome, but if you get used to it, it will probably stop feeling that way. I haven't been using drone boats in a very long time, and I can definitely tell you that that the drones, that I'm a bit rusty with drones. That's what I'm trying to say. I used to be extremely good at them back when I was flying the RB almost daily. Nowadays, nowadays I only fly the Stratos for a drone boat, and I think that's mostly because of the fact that I have more ease lost in drones than in ships, because back then, and even when I take my Stratos out, players always, and they still actually focus on my drones every time. So one of the reasons why I stopped using drones for PvP is, well, that reason, and the new drones are quite expensive. So losing them can be, can have an impact on the wallet. It's basically like losing a ship. That's how much the new drones cost. But they're good. They have fantastic DPS, and on the Stratos and on some of the faction ships, the drones, the expensive ones, are definitely the way to go. Although you can, and I still would say, the true way to go is with the normal drones, because they are much cheaper and very easy to replace. I mean, that's basically the same issue in EVE Online as well. When they start to kill your drones, yeah, it can be quite frustrating, but once you get used to it, it's not really a big issue. In my case, I haven't been flying drone modes in a while, and yeah, I can definitely see what aspects of the drone boats I'd be rusty at, and that would be the drone hot swap, as you can call it. So on both ships, I forgot to mention this, on both ships you can use sentry drones. They're good for sniping, they're good for PvE mostly. I wouldn't use the sentries for PvP, mostly because they require you to be stationary, or they require you to scoop the drones if you move away from them. You can't scoop them back in if they are far away, but they do the most damage. And you also have the sniper sentries, which have extended range. You have the offense sentries, which have more DPS. You can basically pick between the drones that you like. For PvE, the sniper sentries are definitely good, but I'm not really a fan of sentries, and I don't use them that often. But for the highest possible DPS, the sentries are definitely the way to go. But keep in mind, if something gets too close to you, you are not going to be able to hit them at close range, because they simply don't have the tracking to do so. And now the question, well, it is not really a question, but more of a idea, and I guess more of players being curious to see what ship works better in different scenarios. I would say, for the price, if you don't have ISK for the Rattlesnake, then the Dominix is definitely the way to go. Doesn't have to be the tier 10 Dominix. The tier 9 Dominix has about the same performance, and it costs much less. The Rattlesnake is definitely unique, and I would say the Rattlesnake, if you want to go for the Rattlesnake, if you are primarily looking for, let's say, a tanky battleship, a very tanky battleship, because the Rattlesnake is definitely extremely good at tanking. You can also use the Rattlesnake for DPS and for PvP, and you can also run the Rattlesnake as a passive PvP, passive shield tank PvP ship. Also works extremely well. So in the end, it doesn't matter which ship you choose to buy, or I mean, if you ask me, I would say get both of them, because both are fantastic ships, and in the end, both of these ships do get a passing grade from me. When I say a passing grade, it means both ships are fantastic, and I don't really see anything bad about them. They're all unique and extremely fun in their own way. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask me in the comments. I'll be sure to answer them as accurate as I can. If you would like to support me, feel free to like and subscribe. And with that being said, stay safe, fly safe, and as always, I'll see you next time.